Welcome back to the deep dive. This time we're hopping in our temporal life rafts and paddling back to April 1912.
Ah, yes, to witness the launch of the Unsinkable ship. A phrase that knowing what we know just drips with irony, doesn't it?
It really does. It's almost like watching a historical drama unfold, knowing the ending is a tragedy.
So, for our listener, let's set the stage. We're standing on the docks of Southampton. What are we seeing? What's the energy like?
Imagine this, a ship so colossal it dwarfs everything around it. The RMS Titanic, a symbol of human ambition gleaming under the spring sun. There's a bustling energy on the docks, excited passengers, anxious families waving goodbye, the smell of salt air and coal smoke, a true spectacle of the era.
It's easy to get swept up in the excitement, isn't it? This is the pinnacle of luxury travel. Can you paint a picture of what awaited those lucky enough to be on board? Oh, absolutely. Step into a world of opulence. Think sweeping grand staircases, glittering chandeliers, Turkish baths, a swimming pool, amenities unheard of on any other ship at the time. First-class passengers were treated like royalty, extravagant dinners, live music, and a general air of unbridled optimism. They were sailing into a new era.
All with a tragic blind spot, right?
Yeah.
Knowing what we know, it's hard to fathom that sense of security they must have felt. But let's not forget about the other side of the coin, the steerage passengers.
Their experience was vastly different. Cramped quarters, shared facility, it was all about practicality, a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyle above. Many were immigrants' families leaving everything behind for the promise of a new life in America.
So two very different worlds coexisting on the same vessel. And it's this social divide, this stark contrast between opulence and hardship that adds another layer of complexity to the story, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The Titanic was a microcosm of society at the time, reflecting the rigid class structures that ultimately played a significant role in the unfolding tragedy.
All right, so the Titanic sets sail, embarking on its maiden voyage. Everything is buzzing with anticipation. What happens next?
Well, for the first few days, the journey is smooth sailing, quite literally. But on the night of April 14th, the seemingly unsinkable ship encounters an obstacle, an iceberg.
And this is where our knowledge from the future really kicks in. It's almost like a slow-motion train wreck, right? We can see the iceberg looming, and yet on board, the danger isn't fully grasped.
Exactly. The initial impact isn't dramatic. Some passengers feel a slight jolt, others barely notice. But beneath the surface, a fatal wound has been inflicted, a series of gashes along the hull, letting in the icy Atlantic water.
So what's the initial reaction on board? Do they realize the severity of the situation right away?
Not at first. The crew begins to assess the damage, but there's a sense of disbelief, a lingering faith in the unsinkable label. Many passengers remain oblivious, continuing their evening festivities, a chilling juxtaposition to the impending disaster.
There's that dramatic irony again. It's almost painful to witness, knowing the true extent of the danger. And what about the crew? When does the realization hit them?
As water begins to flood the lower compartments, the gravity of the situation becomes undeniable. Distress signals are sent out, but the closest ship, the Carpathia, is hours away. The unthinkable truth starts to dawn. The Titanic is sinking.
And that's where we'll pause for now, leaving our listener with this image. The unsinkable ships slowly succumbing to the icy depths, the clock ticking towards a disaster that will echo through history. As the Titanic sinks deeper into the icy Atlantic, we're struck by the human stories unfolding amidst the chaos.
It's a moment where history becomes intensely personal, where individual choices and actions take center stage. We see the best and worst of humanity on display, acts of selflessness and cowardice, desperate hope and crushing despair.
And it's these stories that really grip us, don't they? The individual experiences that bring the tragedy to life, that make it more than just a historical event.
Absolutely. For instance, the account of the ship's band continuing to play even as the deck tilted beneath them. Some historians suggest it wasn't just about calming the passengers, it was about maintaining a sense of order, of dignity, in the face of unimaginable fear.
Almost a defiance of fate, wouldn't you say? To meet their end with music, not screams. And then there's the story of the postal workers diligently sorting mail as the ship sank beneath them.
It's almost surreal, isn't it? A testament to their duty, perhaps even a form of denial clinging to routine in the face of the extraordinary.
And what about the wireless operators? They remained at their posts until the very end, frantically sending out those distress signals. What impact did their actions have?
Their role was absolutely critical. Their tireless efforts tapping out those Morse code messages brought the Carpathia racing to the rescue. While many lives were tragically lost, the Carpathia was able to save over 700 survivors. Without those distress signals, the outcome could have been even more devastating.
It's a stark reminder of the power of communication, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. So as we witness the Carpathia arriving, those lifeboats being emptied, what happens next? How does the world react to this unimaginable disaster?
The news of the Titanic sinking sent shockwaves across the globe. Newspapers were filled with harrowing accounts, images of the wreckage stories of survivors and those lost. There was a collective sense of disbelief of mourning as the world grappled with the magnitude of the tragedy.
It's hard to imagine the impact of that news, especially in a time when communication was so much slower. No instant updates, just the agonizing wait for information.
Exactly. And as the initial shock subsided, a wave of inquiries followed. The world wanted answers. How could this unsinkable ship have met such a fate? Who was responsible?
And what did those inquiries reveal? Was it simply an unavoidable accident, or were there contributing factors?
The investigations both in Britain and the United States uncovered a number of systemic failures. A lack of sufficient lifeboats, inadequate safety regulations, a disregard for ice warnings, all these factors contributed to the disaster.
So this wasn't just about an iceberg. It was about human error, about a system that wasn't prepared for such a catastrophic event.
Precisely. The Titanic sinking exposed the flaws in maritime safety protocols, the dangers of complacency, and the tragic consequences of prioritizing speed and luxury over safety.
It's a sobering reminder that even the most advanced technology can't overcome human fallibility. And what about the long-term impact? Did the Titanic sinking lead to any significant changes?
Oh, absolutely. The tragedy spurred a wave of reforms in maritime safety regulations. The International Ice Patrol was established to monitor icebergs, ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for all passengers and crew, and wireless communication became a mandatory safety feature on all passenger vessels. The legacy of the Titanic then is one of both immense loss and profound lessons learned.
It's a reminder that even in the face of such devastating loss, something positive can emerge. A renewed focus on safety, on accountability, on preventing such a tragedy from ever happening again. But as we step back from this pivotal moment in history, there's another question that lingers.
And what's that?
How does the story of the Titanic resonate with us today? What echoes of this tragedy can we find in our own time?
That's a question that's as relevant today as it was over a century ago. The Titanic, while a historical event, also serves as a powerful metaphor for the challenges we face even now.
What do you mean? Can you elaborate on that?
Think about it. The Titanic represented the pinnacle of human achievement at the time, and yet it was brought down by a combination of factors: hubris, a disregard for warnings, systemic failures.
So you're saying we're still susceptible to the same pitfalls. We might have different ships, so to speak, but the underlying issues remain.
Exactly. Look at our own reliance on technology, for instance. We place so much faith in it, but often overlook the potential risks, the unintended consequences. The Titanic serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of human ingenuity, the need for humility in the face of nature's power.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always linear, and that even in our advanced age, we're not immune to disaster. And what about the social inequalities exposed by the tragedy? Do those still resonate today?
Absolutely. The stark contrast between the experiences of first-class and steerage passengers on the Titanic highlights a timeless truth. Social structures can often determine who thrives and who struggles, even in moments of crisis.
It's a sobering thought. The Titanic sinking wasn't just about a ship hitting an iceberg. It was about the human element, the systemic issues that magnified the tragedy.
And that's why the story continues to resonate with us. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our societies, about the choices we make as individuals and as a collective.
So what can we learn from the Titanic? What lessons should we carry with us as we navigate our own complex world?
For me, it's a reminder to constantly question assumptions, to challenge the status quo, to remember that progress isn't guaranteed and that vigilance, empathy, and a sense of shared responsibility are crucial for navigating the challenges we face.
It's about learning from the past, not just remembering it, to use history as a guide, source of wisdom as we chart our course towards the future.
Beautifully put. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the Titanic.
Indeed. But before we go, let's leave our listener with one final thought. Imagine you had a chance to send a message back to those setting sail on the Titanic. Knowing what we know now, what would you tell them? What words of wisdom, of caution would you share?
What a thought-provoking question. Perhaps we'd remind them to cherish every moment, to appreciate the connections they have, to look beyond the surface, to question assumptions, and to remember that true strength lies in compassion and unity.
Because ultimately, the story of the Titanic isn't just about a ship that sank. It's a story about the human spirit, about our capacity for both greatness and folly. It's a story that continues to speak to us, to challenge us, to remind us of what truly matters.
Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those temporal anchors tight.